The internet then, kind of useful, isn't it? We're going to go over the internet and some of the technologies which are on it which make it so useful. But let's just start off straight off with a definition. So what is the internet? Well, it's a global network of networks. So we have the idea of a network, and if we connect them together and they go across the whole planet, then it becomes the internet. All right, so that is what the internet is a global network of networks. And some of the most useful things you will find on the internet are provided by servers, which is something that we're going to talk about now. What a server is and how it is used. So a server provides a service to a client, and it's one of those things which is probably best given as an example so it's sort of better understood. And the example we'll go through is with a web server. So if you imagine you sat in front of your computer on the web browser, you are a client, and you will type in a web address at the top of your browser, and then your browser will go to a web server somewhere and request the service, which in this case is delivering a web page. So see how that works? You have a web server and you have yourself there as a client getting the web page. So here's our server, here's our web page, here's you getting that web page, and here it is. You request the web page from the server, and then in its response, it gets returned to you as a client. Okay, and then everything else we're going to talk about really revolves around this and what servers are and how they're used, because we're going to talk about hosting. So if you wanted to set up a web server somewhere, you've got a couple of options in front of you. You've got the idea of doing hosting, and you've got the idea of using some sort of cloud services, which is what we're going to cover now. So hosting is where you get someone to run the server for you, because you've got quite a lot of cost in the setup of this. You've got the idea that you'll have to buy a very powerful computer called a server. You'd have to do all the network hardware for that server. It is not cheap, and it requires quite a bit of technical expertise. So you probably end up having to pay somebody to manage that server. So like here, for example, this server here, if you're hosting, will be stored by hosting.inc, which is let's say that's a company, and then quite often you will pay them a monthly fee. But that would be, importantly, cheaper than having to host the whole thing yourself and pay somebody to maintain it for you. But you, as the owner of that server, usually have quite a bit of control over the actual machine itself. So that means like you can set up and sort out your own security around it, and you don't necessarily run into too many problems with the Data Protection Act if you host that server within your country and you protect it thoroughly. Okay, so that's hosting. So then what is the cloud? Because that is sort of like hosting, but just subtly different, and it does actually give us a lot more benefits. So let's talk about this. What's the cloud? Well, basically, it's when you do this. It's when you don't care about the server whatsoever. So you don't care about that physical box, and you just want the service. You just want, for example, somewhere to store your files or somebody to run a web page for you. You don't care about the actual physical hardware doing it. You just focus on the service itself. And we can use the cloud for all sorts, but one of the most common ones that we use it for is for file storage. So this is something like Google Drive, for example. The idea that we are storing our files somewhere on a server somewhere on the internet, but we don't care about which server. We just want them to be available to us all the time. And this comes with a heck of a lot of advantages as using the cloud. First off, it's probably the cheapest option that's available to you. Quite often, it is cheap than obviously storing any file server yourself, but it's also often given away for free. Also, the services which are provided to you can be easily extended. So, for example, for file storage, more space can be given to you easily, more actual hard drive space. And often these days, they all come with sort of collaborative features. So you've got the idea for like Google Drive, for example, you can easily share files between groups and between people. But you've also got sort of like online word processors and online spreadsheets, which let you work collaboratively as well. When you're dealing with cloud computing, it just provides that service. And it's worth saying, using the cloud, you end up with the advantages of hosting as well. So you don't have to worry about paying someone to run that server for you or anything like that. But But it's not all peaches and cream. It's not all positives. There are some real negatives here to sort of focus on in the cloud. The first off is because you are giving up control of any sort of computer whatsoever. You don't know where that information is going to be stored. So you can often run into issues with the Data Protection Act, for example. Is that data being stored outside the country without your knowledge? Are you unknowingly breaking it? And you are relying on somebody else to have all the correct security procedures in place for you. And that to some is very risky. And lastly, and this is probably the biggest one, you need the internet connection. You need an internet connection for all this to work. So if your internet goes down in the office and you've got everything on cloud servers somewhere, then all of a sudden everything grinds to a halt. And that is a huge issue sometimes. So there you go. Hopefully we've sort of detangled a little bit what the cloud does. Hopefully we've got an idea of hosting, and we understand now that the internet really runs on these things called servers, which provide us with loads of services as clients. If you found that video useful, please hit the like button and hit subscribe to the channel. Keep learning and revising more computer science by clicking on the videos linked here.